investments. We have Matthew Cruz with us here today. And well, we got some timely stuff to talk about today. What an eventful day it was in the markets. Man, we had some big rallies in the grain trade, and it was led by the soybeans and also the wheat. Interesting stuff. If you would, be sure to like this video and make sure that you subscribe to it. Click on that little bell icon, and we'll let you know every time we update these episodes each day. And be sure to share this video with others too, because what we have to say is very important when it comes to marketing for this year. Matthew, let's talk about the finish that we had in the grains. We had quite a day led apparently by soybeans. And I'm just wondering, you have big time connections with Brazil. And from what I understand, there is just incredible flooding going on in southern Brazil right now. Or is it more widespread than that? Shed some light on that, if you would.
Yeah, so big day today, Marlon, in the markets. Let's see, we ended up in the July contract up 33 3/4, pretty close to what the close was. So, yeah, Rio Grande do Sul is the southernmost state in Brazil. That's traditionally where most of the soybean production was, but it's obviously, as people know, been moving further north. But it's still a sizable producing state. It is the second largest producing state behind Mato Grosso. They're expecting close to 22 million metric tons of production, or they were expecting close to 22 million metric tons of production. The last 3 years, they've been experiencing some very challenging drought in that area, and so now that they're going through a El Nino, they're kind of finally having a good season, and they were expecting some of the production loss in Mato Grosso was going to get picked up in Rio Grande do Sul. And I do have family from there, by the way. That's originally where my parents-in-law were from, and so I've been to that state several times and know some people from that area. And so it's a very good state in terms of production. That's where it's one of the largest producing states for first crop corn. They also produce a lot of wheat and rice as well, which is also being impacted. But so essentially, what's happened here, I think the market, was kind of writing Brazil's soybean crop off because they were at the tail end of it, right? They had over 90% harvested overall. In that state, there was still 30% left to be harvested. And so you're talking, a little over 6.5 million metric tons of soybeans that were out in the field yet remain left to be harvested. And typically in this time of year, between the April-May time period, they'll still get 6, maybe 7 inches of rain as an average. Well, so far they've gotten over 20, and they're expected to get another 10 inches or more here in the next week or so. And so it's, it was already kind of wet, and now it's just kind of turned apocalyptic. Like there's been massive flooding. We've seen a lot of these horrible images of homes getting wiped out from floods, from mudslides, things like that. You see images of what appears to be a lake, but just a few short days ago, there was a thriving soybean field underneath that was waiting to be harvested. And so it, for lack of better expression, it's somewhat apocalyptic is the way it's been subscribed to me. And so they're going through a very challenging time here, and it just happened very, very quickly. And the market wasn't expecting it. No one was really expecting it, right? Because they already had over half of their crop out, and they're expecting to get really good yields. And so, the market is nobody really knows what the damage is, right? I mean, it's all underwater at this point. They haven't had any flooding like this for over 80 years. It's the worst in over 80 years apparently. And so, but there's been estimates thrown out there that anywhere between 2 to 5 million metric tons has been lost. I would say even if it's on the lower end of that 2 million metric tons, you're still going to have a lot of quality issues take place on what remains, what is able to be harvested. You also have, it's not just what it has been harvested. I think we have images of grain elevators or grain bins that are underwater as well. And so I'm not saying that's everywhere, but you have large supplies sitting in a grain structure someplace that are underwater, and so it's affected almost everything. I think maybe the ports are still working, but they can't move the grain anymore from farm to field, or from field to the city, or from grain elevator to the port, and so roads are shut down. All their supply logistics are shut down, and so and there's not a lot they can do, right? They're just now it's just a waiting game. Just got to sit and wait, and wait for things to dry out, which looks like it's going to be a while.
I know I saw in national media and social media over the weekend, there was video of that, I think it was a 6-lane expressway, and it had a long river bridge, and it was either gone in portions of it, or had been totally inundated, and it was just covered in trash, and brush and that sort of thing that had been dumped onto the bridge. But many sections of it were just gone. And if that was a main expressway, I just wondered, like you say, I wondered how many arteries have been impacted to where you can't get the grain to the coast now.
Yeah, I think it's pretty widespread. I mean, what the estimates I've seen, there's crop damage done in every corner of the state. Now, maybe it leans a little bit more towards the western side of the state, which I think the rainfall is kind of slightly increased in that area, but you can find damage in every corner of the state right now. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's not much they can do right now. I mean, I've seen pictures of or video of combines completely underwater. It's that deep. You just barely see the cab sticking out above the top of the water, and so I don't know how tall some of those combines are, but 20 feet maybe. And so it's crazy to think how quickly that has happened, and it's not just the crop issues. I mean, there's been a significant loss of life. I think the last estimate I saw, there's already 70 people have been killed, and maybe over 100 are missing. And so it's a terrible situation what's going on there right now. And so, but I think that obviously the market is taking a look at that, and is concerned about it, and it looks like it's going to last for another week or more yet.
I wanted to get your take on the weakness in the market that we saw over the Sunday night trade. I mean, it didn't seem like there was much really going on. It was all mainly after the market opened up here on Monday morning, and then they really took off.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit baffled by that. Is there more to the story? I mean, it's not like the flooding was a big secret until 8:30 Monday morning.
Well, I first off, you always get low volume or low liquidity trading in the overnight, and so it really doesn't pick up until the next morning when people kind of get to their desks and their chairs after having been gone for the weekend. But I think the other thing that you're seeing is um, obviously for a long time we've known that we've had that the managed money investment funds have been heavily short for a long period of time, and there hasn't really been anything to spook them out of the market. And so I wonder if that's part of it, that when you have these shorts that have been in the market as long as they have, and there's suddenly some fundamental reason for them to get spooked and jump out, I mean, that has a kind of a triggering effect, or domino effect is maybe the better expression, when suddenly they start jumping ship. When you get these big moves like this, like it's just not worth it. Let's take our profits. Let's get out. And so that's why you see these big moves of 30 plus cents in one day.
Now, the big move in wheat, from what I understand, that had a little bit of a different fundamental reasoning behind it. Just wondered if you had any details on that. Was that related more to Russia?
Yeah, I think probably more to Russia and some of their weather issues that they're having there. They've been experiencing some drought-like conditions in areas there, and of course, Russia is a large producer and exporter, and able to move the market quite a bit. So I think that's a big part of it as well. Brazil isn't a large wheat producer, but oddly enough, nearly half of the wheat in Brazil is in that state of Rio Grande do Sul. And so the wheat production in that state is being impacted as well. I don't know if the market is aware of that, but there's also a lot of rice produced in that state as well. And so we're kind of looking at the rice market to see if it moved the needle roughly 75% of the rice produced in Brazil is in that state of Rio Grande do Sul as well.
I had heard some rumors over the weekend that maybe there were freeze concerns in some of the areas there in maybe Ukraine or Russia, maybe on some of that wheat that was maybe susceptible to a freeze event yet. That probably didn't help the cause. And I would imagine that the funds are still pretty heavily short on the wheat.
Yeah, I think that's the case. They're short. Seems like they've been short everything for several months now, 6+ months now. So I think that's part of it as well. But yeah, I think that some of those potential climate issues are definitely having an impact on what's going on over there.
So is corn just a follower now?
It kind of seems like it. I think it's interesting that this is happening this week, right before we have our May WASDE report coming out on Friday. And so it'll be interesting to see how the USDA reacts to this. I would argue that the market was expecting a production cut uh, prior to these issues going on in Rio Grande do Sul. They were expecting, 3 to 4 million ton cut in soybeans, I think, and probably that much or more in corn. And so now with this kind of thrown on top of it, it's going to be ridiculous. I would say if we get to Friday and USDA comes out and they still stand their ground at their production levels that they're at. So yeah, I think we need to start seeing some action from the USDA, recognizing these obvious issues that are happening. Otherwise, there's going to be rioting in the streets.
Well, you were one of the very first people I know of that came out with a prediction of bean production in Brazil of, I think you said 145 or 146 million bushels. And that was a long time before the others kind of came along, and it seemed like that kind of started a trend. CONAB actually came in very close, I believe, to your early estimates. You came up with those figures right after you had hosted your own farm tour in Brazil from some Americans that were down there. And like you say, USDA just wouldn't budge. And last we knew, there were still about 10 million tons over what CONAB had said. They've got to come together here within the next month or so, you would think, one way or the other. And I just have a hard time believing that USDA is even in the realm.
Yeah, it's actually even larger in the case of the corn. I think it's like 13.5 million metric ton gap between USDA and CONAB, and so I'm not gonna swear on the Bible that CONAB is exactly right, but I do think they need to come together, and it's kind of ridiculous at this day and age with the information that we have and the satellite technology that they're this far apart. And so I talk to people there on the ground that are just adamant that that CONAB is right and the crop isn't there. As you mentioned, I went there myself in Mato Grosso and saw the crop damage firsthand. I mean, you could really see it, and it was a large area. This was a lot of times, you hear these things happen. You're like, well, how big of an area is this? But it was, pretty much most areas of that state of Mato Grosso, which is a huge area, got impacted to some extent. And I don't care what part of the world you're in. I mean, you just can't go 30 or 40 days without rain and not have any type of impact when you have 95, 100 degree heat temperatures on top of that. And so, I'm sure there was some recovery at the end, but the yield got clipped for sure. In the case of the corn, the production side of it, productivity side, probably isn't all that far off. I think the big difference is farmers there cut back on how many acres they wanted to plant a little bit more than what USDA realizes, just because they got clipped pretty bad on the soybeans, and corn prices they're underwater. There's no money in planting corn there in the safrinha corn right now, especially in the Mato Grosso region. And so there's no incentive for them to want to expand corn acres, or at least plant the same amount that they did last year, because they're going to lose money. The average producer is going to lose money there. That's, unfortunately the situation. And so but it just seems like USDA is not taking that into consideration right now. So, yeah, I'm not saying that CONAB can't come up a little bit, but USDA, I think it has to come to reality, come to terms here, and make some cuts. And uh, eventually they'll probably do it. The question is when, right? It doesn't do us any good if they do it 6 months from now. That's the problem.
Speaking of corn, I keep hearing more and more stories about Argentina having issues with their corn crop. It seems like that's more pest related, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of a similar situation where they started out having a great crop. They were, I think, in their corn, they're expected to produce over 56 million metric tons. And the latest projection from the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange is like 46 million metric tons. So they've actually lost 10 million metric tons from their earlier crop estimates, which is quite a lot for anywhere. I mean, that's, you're talking close to 400 million bushels. That makes a big difference. That'd be like the U.S. corn yield losing, close to 3 bushels per acre. I mean, that would definitely be a market mover. And so, but it's happened gradually here over time, and it's just kind of caught up with them here at the end with, I think they call it leaf hopper, that they've had this tremendous insect damage that's come in at the end and has clipped yields. And I think their harvest is behind schedule as well. They have a very long tail to their harvest, but I think there's something like 11% behind their 5-year average as well, and so they have a long ways to go. But yeah, they're not having a great end to their crop season as well.
I'll bet you that the Comstock office has been fielding a lot of calls now with people getting an itchy trigger finger. I've heard a lot of talk about people dreaming about $5 corn and $12 beans. Well,
We're
now
just
what
out there,
what
right?
are they going to do here, right?
Well, yeah, we're excited because we've been waiting for this moment patiently for a while to make some more sales. We were fortunately fairly aggressive in our old crop corn, and but we're gonna start to catch up at the very end here, and I think begin layering in some new crop sales on corn. But we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. But yeah, we're targeting closer to that $5 and where we want to begin. But we could still there still could be legs to this rally, especially if the USDA makes some of these production cuts back here in the U.S. too. I think the market is still realizing that there's still a lot of it's pretty wet out here yet, and there's some areas in Iowa that are going to get an inch or two here this week, and so they're still not going to probably get as much done as they'd like, and it's going to continue to slow things up a little bit. Probably not as bad as last week, but so I think the there's still time, but we're probably not going to get as much done in the first half of May as we would have liked, and that's kind of the ideal period. I think but there's still time to get caught up here in kind of the middle of May yet.
Matthew, I know you have a lot of people that subscribe to the company's comments, and also they get your marketing advice that you publish, and it gets pretty detailed. You guys come out with some very interesting and highly detailed updates and recommendations. If somebody out there listening or watching this would like to get in on that, how do they do that?
You can just go to comstock.com. You can sign up there for a trial. I think it's a 1 month free trial for $1. All it is for the first month. And yeah, you receive 11 reports each week. We go into quite a bit of detail. We provide a lot of firsthand experience because we farm in Northwest Iowa ourselves. Well, I also farm with my family in Brazil. And so, yeah, we give a lot of firsthand insights. I think probably maybe most importantly right now, we're actually giving sales and targeting recommendations for when to price in that. So a lot of the recommendations that we're giving, we're incorporating in our own operation as well. And so I think a lot of times that's what guys and gals maybe need the most help with, just kind of benchmark their marketing, their sales with what other people are doing. And so we give them a chance to do that. So they can kind of see what we're doing and give them some ideas.
Yeah, well, traditionally, over the next several weeks, that tends to be the most critical time of year to do some marketing. So, yeah, that would be excellent. I encourage everybody to check that out. And I'm sure your office, the phone number there is always welcome to take some calls if you guys have questions out there watching. What is your main office phone number there?
You can give us a call at 712-227-1110.
Okay, before I let you go, one quick question for you. Given the market action we had today and we closed near the high of the day, how critical is it that we close higher tomorrow?
Well, we definitely want to see follow through tomorrow. It's possible we got a little bit overheated today. I think the markets are going to want to digest the planting progress report that's coming out here in about an hour from when we're taping this now, and so they'll want to see what progress is being made. They're going to look at the forecast, but uh, in the case of the corn, we kind of closed right up on a long-term trend line, and so it's actually pretty important that we break through that trend line and continue on to the upside, and that's kind of where we're going to start making some sales, assuming we can break through that. But I think we have a little bit more upside in the corn. I'm probably even more bullish in the case of the soybeans because there is a gap that's been opened in the soybeans closer to the $13 range, and so we're actually we made some catch-up sales here recently in soybeans, but we're targeting that $13 gap that I think could eventually be closed yet. It might take a little while, but that's what we're targeting for our next place.
Well, there you have it. Some good clues direct from Matthew Cruz himself. Hey, Matthew, thanks for joining us here on the episode. Always a pleasure to talk with you. Covered a lot of very important